This is Paul Schmid. Welcome to the Pursuit Zone. In June of 2010, Greg Petry and Lucas Will set out to circumnavigate Lake Superior in handmade Greenland-style kayaks. It was a 97-day, 1,200-mile expedition they call Superior Dream. The men hoped to showcase the lake's beauty and impact on the region by turning the 80 hours of video they captured into a documentary film of their adventure. You can read more about their journey at superiordream.com. Greg Petry, welcome to the Pursuit Zone.
Thanks, Paul. I'm glad to be here.
Greg, how did you get into kayaking?
Well, I've always had a love of being outside from a very little kid growing up and visiting boundary waters and stuff like that. So when I got to University of Minnesota Duluth and living around the lake, it just kind of seemed a natural step to check out kayaking through one of the university's outdoor programs there.
I was reading through your material, and you were a kayaking guide in Alaska. Tell me about, how did you come about getting that job, and what was that like?
Sure. So we worked for a company based out of Seward, Alaska, which is south central Alaska, right off of the Resurrection Bay. The company's name is Adventure 60 North. And basically, both Luke and I, while we'd done some kayaking through UMD and done a bunch of other guiding through rock climbing and all that kind of stuff, we realized that we really didn't have a ton of kayaking experience on really big water. So we both kind of decided, hey, let's shoot for guiding in Alaska. We'd had some friends that had kind of paved the road before us and gone up there and knew some names, and they were names that we could drop to help land us this job. But the whole idea behind it was, to have this kind of grand adventure for a summer and guide in a different environment and really kind of get used to some bigger water and test our skills a bit out there.
So was being in that bigger water what gave you the idea for the Superior Dream project?
Actually, no. I was living with Luke. So Luke and I were roommates, and one night we were probably having some PBRs and talking about just this love of the lake that we both had, and we came around to the idea that we both really wanted to see the entire shoreline by kayak and have that experience. So then it was only natural that we're kind of like, well, let's do it together, and then the whole idea kind of grew from there. Well, let's do this. I'm really interested in maybe building our own kayaks. Well, I'm really interested in filming it and kind of bringing something back and having something to give back to not only the community, but, in through our eyes and our hearts back to the lake as well. So that idea came from just a night in college and two guys talking about how much they really, really cared about Lake Superior.
And how much time from when you had that initial conversation to when you guys got in the water, how much time went by?
Years, actually. Yeah, that was when we were finishing up our degree with recreation outdoor education. We both got a bachelor's in that. And then we kind of did our own thing, and every once in a while we'd touch base with each other. Hey, yeah, you still want to do this? Yes, yeah, let's do this. We would email a Word document back and forth. That was just kind of our brainstorming process of where were we going to build our boats, what kind of boats do we want, what sort of costs do we think we're going to have, meal planning, all that sort of stuff, along with kicking around the idea of names for the documentary and where funding is going to come from, all that kind of stuff. So we spent a couple of years just kind of idly attaching that Word document through emails back and forth, and about 2 years before our departure date, I was visiting Luke out in Oregon, and I said, you know what, we've either got to do this or I've got to move on. We got to put a date on the calendar, and then make steps for it, because otherwise this is going to be in limbo for who knows how long. So about 2 years before that, we put a date on the calendar and really started to pin things down on where we were going to go, who we were going to talk to for certain things, and that's pretty much when it really started coming together.
How challenging was it planning-wise and in terms of getting funding? Was this something that you guys could fund yourself fairly easily, or did you really have to go out and get a lot of sponsorships?
We tried really hard for sponsorships. We got a few local sponsors. We had a much easier time finding people to back us because we didn't have a huge resume of expeditions of this nature or projects like this. We didn't get a ton of really big named, like Werner Paddles and GoPro were the Crazy Creek as well. And Perception Kayaks actually helped us out. Probably talk a lot about that company a little later, but those are kind of some of the bigger names. The rest of them, like Adventure 60 North, the kayak company that we used, Rick Brown's the name of the guy, he, said, hey, you know what, let me know how I can help, and he helped us out. Lake Superior Brewing Company, based out of Duluth here, was a really big sponsor as well, and kind of helped us out with some of the celebration afterwards. So we had a much better luck as far as business sponsorship going locally. However, we ended up getting really creative with that whole process too. Luke and I, are being guides and educators, aren't rolling in the dough, so to speak. So we had a garage sale that a lot of, like Luke's parents hosted the garage sale, and we were able to pull in some money through that. Just kind of pre-ordering. We did a Kickstarter, crowdsource fundraising event as well, which we are super excited that we met and exceeded our goal with that to kind of help with the funding of the film. So money was kind of coming in through a hodgepodge of many different areas.
Greg, when I read through your blog, what I saw was sort of a story in 3 parts. Part 1, build the kayaks. Part 2, the paddle expedition. And Part 3, trying to get a movie made. So let's start with part 1, building the kayaks. So why the Greenland-style kayak?
So we chose the Greenland-style kayak mainly because our original plan was to go through the North House Folk School up in Grand Marais and take a class and build these kayaks to kind of suit our purpose. The Greenland-style kayak is traditionally a seal hunting boat, so a day tripping boat. You go out, you get a seal, you come back. It's a design that's been around for thousands of years. When we were unable to take that class, I think the class itself got canceled and there was no other one within our time frame, I started doing an internet search for just, other options, essentially. And I found an Instructables, Instructable.com site for building your own West Greenland-style kayak. It's a nylon skin on a wood frame, and said it would take about 100 hours to complete, and that fit with our time schedule just fine. So we kind of went through the steps of making multiple trips to the hardware store. I actually had to fell a tree myself to get the wood to bend the ribs. Just kind of, we were putting it all together. The 100-hour project, of course, ended up taking about 2 months to do because we're first-time boat builders. So it was a lot of steep learning curve. We also, something in hindsight, I always kind of shake my head at. We also took a working design and tried to augment it to better fit our needs, which in the long run, it's fine. We ended up putting, any kayakers out there are going to laugh, but we ended up putting in hatches and bulkheads into our design of our kayaks because we were used to the British-style boats and we weren't that comfortable with having to pull everything out. Traditionally, how you access your gear is through the cockpit and only the cockpit. So if you put your sleeping roll all the way in the bow, you have to pull everything that you've shoved in there, food, stove, all that other stuff, sleeping stuff, out before you get to that thing that's stuffed all the way up in the bow. And we were like, well, we decided to try our hand at designing bulkheads and hatches, which, like I said, it worked out for what it is. Ultimately, what we came down to, when we finally finished the kayaks, we had, I think, about 2 days before our scheduled departure date. So we finished these beautiful, sleek, just really sexy kayaks, tested them out on White Bear Lake and paddled around. Felt all right. I felt pretty comfortable in mine. Luke was kind of more of a tight fit for his. But we were like, we're good. We've got our boats just under the wire. We were feeling pretty proud and pretty excited about that.
Yeah, I'd have to say from, looking at the photographs, it looks like you guys did a great job and built some really nice looking boats.
They are, and they are still, we've still got our boats. I try to take mine out as often as I can. It's actually down St. Peter right now, but yeah, they are very, very fun to paddle. They cut through the water. It's very little resistance at all. It's kind of a dream to paddle, to be honest. Something that you build and it works and it floats, which is always important when you're building a boat.
Okay, well, I heard a piece of advice while you were talking, but I'm going to ask this question anyways. What advice do you have for somebody that wants to build their own kayak?
If you are skilled using power tools and, tools in general, one thing that maybe your listeners would be good to know is Luke and I, the last time I had built anything with power tools was a box in the 9th grade, and it's still lacquered shut. It's kind of like a time capsule. So it was very much outside of our comfort zone to be using all of this stuff. We built it in Luke's dad's garage. His dad had access to had all the tools and granted us access to use them. Out of his blessed heart, we told him it'd take us 2 weeks, and it took 2 months. So my advice for people who are building boats, if it's your first boat and you want to be absolutely confident, sign up for a class, talk to a master boat builder. They're titled master boat builders for a reason. But if you're down to wing it, I think it's going to be spendier to take a class. But we put our boats together for roughly about $600 when it was all said and done, which was also very much in line with our budget. So yeah, my advice would be either research the heck out of it and really look at what you want to do, or just sign up for a class, get to know a great community of people that are also interested in doing the same thing, and you'll have, by the end of it, you'll have a whole bunch of people that you can go paddle with too.
So let's get into the expedition now. Where is it that you guys set off from?
We actually used the Duluth Lift Bridge as both the start and the finish line. So we put it in the bay and then paddled out underneath the bridge to start, and then when we came back, that's where we ended. You
started paddling south?
We paddled clockwise. So we went north along the Minnesota border first, or Minnesota shoreline first.
And so at that point, what's your biggest fear?
Our biggest fear, my biggest fear coming and as I paddled underneath the lift bridge was that to date, we'd only been in those boats for maybe a couple of hours on flat White Bear Lake. Now, and I think they were loaded for one try and empty for the other. So my biggest fear paddling underneath the bridge was that we were now going out into a lake that is large enough to produce its own weather, and weather can change real quick. So it's just kind of the ability and whether or not I was going to be able to make the right decision on getting off the lake when versus, what's a healthy way to step beyond and outside of your comfort zone, and continue with the trip. So I think that was my major fear going out. As we were paddling out, we were also seeing some of the bigger water too that these kayaks had seen. It wasn't anything beyond maybe, a 2-foot rollers or whatever, but, which is really nothing in a kayaking world. But we were loaded down. The waves were crashing over the decks. We had probably about 2 inches between the top of our deck and the water. So, in hindsight, we're trying to take loaded down day tripping kayaks out on an expedition, and having all of that weight turned out to be a little bit problematic.
So what ultimately happened with the Greenland kayaks?
Ultimately, we got about a quarter mile into our expedition, And I, looked at Luke and was saying, "Hey, Luke, I'm sitting in a little bit of water here." And he shot back, "Yeah, me too." So we had to right away make that decision. Okay, what's going to be smart? We're out in water. It's not super treacherous by any means. We did just have this wonderful send-off with all of our friends and family watching. Are we going to about face, turn around, and land back on the beach and have to face all of our friends and, say, "Hey, well, the boats we made were taking on too much water." So, but ultimately, that's what we had to do. It was either that or push forward and risk losing not only our kayak, but all of our gear that was in there, all of that stuff, and then not be able to go on. So we got about a quarter mile out, did an about face, and aimed back towards the hotels. I don't know if people are familiar with Canal Park, but there's this lake walk with beach and pebbles and stones, and there's a bunch of hotels there. So we about faced, turned back, and made our first emergency landing of the trip, stopping about three or so times to pump out the water from Luke's kayak to make sure that he could make it back, and met our parents and friends and people with cameras to help document our first emergency landing.
So how did you go about getting a new set of boats?
We took about 4 days. We solved the problems why the water was coming in. We looked at our hatch design and solved that problem. So then we went out on completely flat water within a day or so and paddled around, did a couple miles, just paddling Park Point, which is about a couple mile stretch of sand on beautiful, beautiful paddling water. But ultimately didn't take off until after the third day. We pulled in, took a break. We had to ask ourselves the question that came up a lot during our trip. We had to remind ourselves, what's our goal? If our goal is to see the entire shoreline of the lake, then we might not have to do it. We might not get to do it in the boats that we built. We might have to just take the experience of building a boat for what it was and enjoy that process, but then find some other craft to go around in it. Because ultimately, we were asking a lot from the boats that we built. Luke also could not sit in his boat for longer than 10, 15 minutes, and his legs would go completely numb. I wasn't the most comfortable in my own boat. So our morale was getting pretty low on the fact that we just weren't comfortable. We also knew that we couldn't, because of in a Greenland-style kayak, there's a thing called initial stability, and that's the stability, how secure you feel, keeping the horizon level and how steady the boat goes. In the British-style boats, they're pretty steady. In the West Greenland-style boats, they kind of teeter back and forth. And if we were going to film a documentary, we didn't want to make our audience sick either by having all of these shots of the horizon going from corner to corner. So it was kind of a hard decision. We took another day to really think about it. And ultimately, our friend Billy Davis came in clutch. He had this old tattered business card in his wallet of a Perception Kayaks rep. And he said, "Why don't you give this guy a call?" So Luke did, kind of explained our story, what we were about, what we really wanted to do. And the guy said, "You know what? I've got a pole barn full of demo boats. If you guys want to come out, check them out, and if something works for you, we'll strike a deal," kind of thing. So that's what we did the next day. We got our Perception kayaks and stuffed all our gear in and shoved off. And day 4 or so, we were again paddling, making some ground.
Wow, cool. Pole barn full of boats.
Yeah, I know. Fantastic.
So in the early days, it was probably a little bit difficult to keep up the motivation. You alluded to that, but I mean, overall, during the trip, how was the weather? How were the bug situation? How were you guys easily able to keep up your motivation?
Motivation ebbed and flowed, to be honest. Everything kind of played a role. We learned pretty quickly that if we wanted to eat a bug-free dinner, we needed to be off the water and cooking well before dark. If not, it was kind of a battle. Mosquitoes were pretty gnarly. Weather is you give and you take. you always just got to be real with what's going on right in front of you and be honest with your skill set. The lakes, it's been referred to as an inland sea because it, as I mentioned before, it generates its own weather, and the weather can change very, very quickly. If you're not prepared for that, you don't have the right skills or the right safety gear, the lake will take your life. It's done that. It's got a history of people that, mistakes are made and they don't survive. So we have to keep all of that in mind, and sometimes that does wear, and there are days where it's low, and you might have injured yourself from putting on a long day, 2 days back, and you're really feeling it, and that horizon line or that point that you're looking at just never seems to get any closer. And I think for me personally, what I had to really think about and come to terms with is I was really visioning I was in the mindset of, all right, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to conquer this expedition. I'm going to conquer this lake. And ultimately, on the days when I was feeling like that is when I was struggling the most. On the days where I let that kind of part of me go and really just sit back and be like, it's not about conquering, it's not about owning, because there's no way I'm going to own any part of this other than my own experience, and allowed myself to experience what was going on right now. The days went, much easier. Filming and videoing was a challenge that we did not expect. We knew that it was going to be different, something that we'd never really tried before. But by the end of the trip, every time we were holding up the camera to film something, it was a conscious choice. And that choice in that camera was Luke said it the best when he was talking about every time I film something, I'm a step removed from that experience, because I'm thinking about shot, I'm thinking about duration, I'm thinking about what do I want to capture. So that got very, very draining as well. So,
did you have any interesting wildlife encounters?
Yeah, we did. I had to chase a bear away from our dinner. Thank goodness it was a small bear, because I think if it would have stood its ground, it would have definitely had our dinner. We got to actually witness a bull moose crossing from island to island up in Canada, somewhere around the Rossport area. It was out in the middle, probably had about a mile to go, almost on either side between islands, and we saw it from quite a ways out, and I thought they were just ducks or birds on the water as antlers. And as we got closer, we could hear kind of a heavier breathing. We're like, oh, wow. And we were lucky enough to get close enough, not only to hear this massive animal breathe, but capture a little bit of that on film as well. But it was just one of those things that there's no way in the middle of this mass expanse of water that I expected to see an animal that weighed 2 tons and was just kind of swimming like this is just what he does from island to island. So it was pretty impressive.
Before we get into what I was calling part 3, the trying to get a movie made, the last question I want to ask about the expedition was, if you could do it again, if you wanted to do it again, what's one thing you would do differently?
I do want to do it again, actually. And aside from going the opposite direction, and this is why, I can't tell you how many times one of us, Luke and I, would turn to say something to whoever was behind, and we'd stop and be like, oh my God, did you see that? And just by looking back, you saw a whole new little nook and cranny or thing that you would have totally missed if you were just kind of keeping your eyes straight forward. So I think it would be a totally different trip. You'd see many different things just going counterclockwise as opposed to clockwise like we did. So aside from that, I think I would be a little bit more, if I was to do it again, I kind of kicked the idea around on bringing another camera, but I don't think I would stress out as much about getting as much footage. If you're going to end up with about an hour-long film, 80 hours was a bit excessive. So, I mean, it's great to give your editor something to work with, but there's burnout on that fact too. So,
yeah, that's a lot. I was going to comment on that, but you beat me to it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into the making of the movie, because it seemed like it took quite a while. But before, I just wanted to ask one kind of an intro question is, did you guys have some sort of an education on filmmaking, or did you do your own research to educate yourself about filmmaking? How did that work?
We did a lot of personal research. I know through the photographs that, Luke shares with me that I knew that he could compose a still frame shot. And I took some photography classes, and I felt pretty comfortable with my abilities to frame a shot as well. So, from a still frame to a moving frame, it's a jump, but it felt like a jump that was manageable for us. So we had to do a lot of talking with our other friends. There's a friend and college buddy as well named J.J. Kelly, and with his help from Dudes on Media and Josh Thomas, him and Josh Thomas have done a lot of filmmaking in adventure settings. So we got a hold of those guys, and they kind of talked us through, helped us identify some cameras, helped us identify just the basics of what's going to help in post-production. What do we need to be thinking about while we're filming now that's going to help either us or our editor out come the post-production phase. So a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of kind of just sitting down and practicing. Both Luke and I had to get used to talking to a camera, and kind of doing video journals is something that we decided we were going to do and try to do every day. That accounted for quite a bit of that 80 hours was just, a headshot or whatever of Luke and I talking into the camera and hopefully saying something either witty, funny, or sort of intelligent.
Greg, how many and what type of cameras did you have?
So Luke and I both were in charge of taking care of and using a Sony Handycam, which is a high-definition camera, and it shot on mini DV tapes. We chose that medium on the DVD tape because we wanted to be able to send our footage back. It was the most cost-effective. We couldn't send SD cards, as most adventurers will use. We felt like we were going to have a ton of footage. That was kind of our goal, is film everything and let the editors sort it out. So we wanted to help the editors out as much as possible by sending blocks of footage as we went along. So we'd get to a post office box and mail back, 8-10 hours or whatever we had shot, and then we would replenish our supply of tapes at our food caches. So aside from those Sony Handycams, we had a GoPro camera that we busted out for special shots. It was the only camera that we had with a waterproof housing. I tried to go through and buy a waterproof housing specifically for our camera, and somehow with a mix of different cameras out there that I was looking at, I ordered the wrong one and wasn't able to find one that was going to work for our Handycam. So the GoPro really came in handy for the heavier paddling where the waves were pretty bad, and if there was a risk of us tipping and we wanted to film anything that was done on the GoPro. But other than that, we had still cameras just for our own personal little cameras to take pictures. And so 3 video cameras and 2 Canon Power Shots, I believe they were.
So what proved to be the most challenging part of getting the film made? Because it seemed to me, just from reading through your material, from an outsider's perspective, there seemed to be a lot of different editors involved, and this got handed off to one person and then another person and another person.
Yeah, I think there's, as I'm kind of going back through the whole experience, I think the post-production phase was something that neither Luke or I had any idea of what was involved with that. We did line up 2 student editors through the Arts Institute, a Katie Swanson and a Josh Kloss, and they were graduating seniors. So they were students that were finishing up their degree, and very enthusiastic, extremely talented people. However, it turned out that, and actually Josh Kloss still stayed on and did a lot of the animation for the film. Katie, however, it wasn't realistic with her in her professional life to continue on with the project based on what we had set aside to pay her. And that's just reality. That's the way it was, or the way it is. So we had to switch it up, and we went, leaned on J.J. Kelly and Dudes on Media for their expertise in helping lining up another editor. We had another guy that sounded like he was in between jobs and was willing to put in the work for what we were willing to pay, what we could pay. But, life again kind of happened, and for whatever reason, we ended up landing on a Katie Anders, and she did a fantastic job, even pushing and rearranging her professional life to help us out on this project, and so indebted to her efforts on getting it completed. So just being able to, I think, know that the post-production doesn't necessarily take that long, but keep pushing, keep asking those questions, and being able to look at your own burnout level and be like, man, I am so sick of this project, I just want it done. But digging deep and asking yourself, reminding yourself, well, what's the goal? Do you want to give something back to the lake at this point? And our DVD was the thing that we felt was going to have the most easiest, quickest availability to anybody who's interested. So kind of just leaning back on that helped us get through all that struggle of figuring out the editor.
So congratulations, you guys completed the video, the movie. What is the title of it?
Thank you. It's called Superior Dreams.
And how do people get a hold of this?
So we are in the process of putting a link up on our website. That's superiordream.com. And you'll be able to order the DVD, and we'll get it mailed out to you. Sooner or later, we're going to get a digital copy up there, either through iTunes or some other digital website. Also on our website, we'll have some T-shirts if you're interested in helping us kind of recoup some of the cost of just helping break even, I think, is our goal with, I know that JJ put in a lot with his, that was all volunteer, so we're trying to get, him something nice for his time and effort as well.
So Greg, what's next for you?
I have kind of fallen in love with this whole idea of a tiny home. So I might move out of my place, build a tiny home. I just got a dog named Agate, and we're pretty happy. The other big adventure that's really coming down to making the decision on whether or not it's going to happen, one of those things where I have to put a date on the calendar, is a motorcycle trip down to Patagonia. And then the idea then would be to learn how to sail and get back. So starting in Duluth down to Patagonia, and then sail our way back up the east side of South America, North America, and back into the St. Lawrence Seaway and back to Duluth. I'm really kind of digging the whole circles idea. So that one will be a couple years out yet. I got to learn how to sail, of course, but that would be the big thing.
Very cool. And how can people get a hold of you again?
You can find us at superiordream.com, and there's a link for our blog and email and all that sort of stuff right there.
Okay, Greg Petry, thank you very much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Good luck to you, and also congratulations to Lucas for what you accomplished and for getting the movie made.
I know on behalf of him, thank you very much for having us, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Recorded January 9, 2014. For more great podcasts, visit thepursuitzone.com.